Hey, this is Styles with Beard Logic, and this is episode 3 in the series where we build an adventure game. In this episode, we're going to be focusing on making a state machine, which in future episodes will make adding animations much easier. With all that said, let's get into it. So let's start off by adding an enumerator to the code. For now, we'll be using this as the current state identifier. In the future, we'll be modifying the code to make this far more elegant, but for now, we just want to see our work pay off. So we're just going to add a value for each of the states that we sort of already have in the game, and we'll work our way out from there. What we're going to end up doing is creating a function for each of these states and then using a simple switch statement to go between them. As I said before, there's better ways to do it, but we just want this to work. In addition to each of the state functions, we're also going to want a function that determines whether we should be going into that state or not. So just as a quick example, if we're trying to determine whether we should go into the standard state or not, that is like walking or running, all we have to do is check to see if we're on the ground or not. So in order to keep track of the current state's information, we're probably going to want to add a class, so let's do that now. So we're just going to have one of these in the player controller, but it's going to be changed every time we enter into a new state so that we can tell what state we're in and other relevant data like how much time you've been in the state. Just a minor cleanup here. We don't really need an idle state, so we're just going to get rid of that. So let's just add an instance of one of these up into our player controller and initialize it in the Unity awake function. Alright, so now let's go back to the fixed update function. Here we're going to create a switch statement which will not only allow us to determine which state we should be in, but also call the code of the current active state. So it's pretty straightforward. For each state we'll have a case, and each case will pass us off to the correct code. Now we don't have the function for each state yet, but we're going to do that right away here. So when you're done, it should look something like this. So now let's create the function for each of these states. Now I could just type out the name of each of these, but since I'm in Visual Studios, I'm just going to use their nice functionality to implement the stub for us. Now at this point you may be pleased to know that we've actually already implemented a lot of the code that's going to go into these functions. So for instance, for the wall slide, let's just cut out the code from this update wall slide function, and we can delete the wall slide function itself and paste the code into our new update state function for wall slide. So there are going to be some minor differences. For instance, here when we're checking to see if we're on the ground, we're not going to want to return. Instead, we're going to want to switch to the standard state, or the state we're using for walking and running. And this is where we're going to be using those functions that I mentioned before where we check to see which state we should be in. As you may recall, we've already created one to check to see if we're in the standard state. So let's just move it up a bit and call it from this function. And I just want to pause here for a second to do a bit of cleanup. So I'm going to clean up the call to the update wall slide function here. And we're going to simplify the names in the enumerator as well. Hopefully that last step doesn't cause too much confusion. The names were just bugging me. And since we're kind of doing some cleanup stuff here, let's add the parameter to keep track of the time that we've been in our state. And go back to our fixed update function so that we can update this time every physics update. Now we're going to reset that time in state every time we change to a new state. So at this point in time, it's probably worth creating a function to do the state transitions for us. So we're going to change the active state variable's parameter to the state that's passed in, and we're going to reset the time to 0. Now whenever we want to switch to a new state, all we have to do is call this function. So now let's just duplicate and modify this check function for each of the states that we currently have. So for the wall slide state, what's required before we enter into it? Well, for one thing, we definitely need to be against the wall, and another, we definitely don't want to be on the ground. So if we're on the ground or not against the wall, we're just going to return false. And what's required to make a jump? Well, you need to be on the ground and you need to make sure that the jump key is down. So return false if you're not on the ground or if the jump key isn't pressed. And let's duplicate this one more time for the wall jump function. For the wall jump function, we basically just need to check to see that we're in the wall slide state already and that the jump key has been pressed. Alright, so now let's just handle the state code itself. Let's start by copying the wall slide state code up into the move state code. This is more just to give me a template than anything else. So we have to ask, what states can we go to from the move code? Well, we can definitely go to the jump code, so let's check for the jump state. Remember, if it returns true, it's going to just straight up change to the jump state. And we definitely need to do something different for the velocity in the move code. I think we're handling the movement right now up in the update function, so let's just grab that and bring it back down here. Similarly, for the velocity when you're in the air, we can move that into the jump function. And also, if you recall, we have an update jump function, which we need to move into here as well. Now remember, we're already in this state, so we really don't need to check to see that we're against the wall. We can add that in as a check to see if we're wall sliding. Yeah, so now that I'm looking at this, we probably want another state for when we're falling. So let's go ahead and add that now. So we're going to need to add a new enumerator values. Let's do that first. And then we're also going to need a state function, a check function, and we need to add it to the switch statement as well. So let's add the update state function here. And this is where we're going to need that velocity modifier that we have currently in the update state jump function. And we got enough of these update functions that I kind of want to hide them once in a while, so let's add a region around them too. So let's then add the check for state fall function. So similar to what we had before, we basically just need to make sure that we're in the air and that our velocity is going downward. Something else to consider in the fall check is whether you're against a wall or not, because if you are, you might end up falling instead of going into the wall slide state. This is where you can really start to see the power of this state transition system. Because now, if we're in a move state, we might actually end up in a fall state if we, like, say, walk over an edge. So all we really have to do is check to see if we're in a fall state, and that's basically it. And let's just copy that code down into the jump state as well, because once you reach an apex, you're going to start falling. So it makes sense that you're going to need a transition into the fall state from the jump state. We can also copy that into several of the other functions as well. And if we're in the wall slide state, we don't need to check if we're against the wall, so let's remove that. And if you're falling and you end up hitting the ground, of course it makes sense that you transition into the move state. Another possibility is you end up hitting a wall while you're falling, so you might end up transitioning into the wall slide state. So really what I'm doing at this point is going through each state and deciding which other state you might be able to transfer into. Of course, because of the way this system works, it's very easy to modify the behavior of the character simply by deciding what states he can go into and which ones he can't go into. So let's go back up to the jump state function. The fall state now handles that code, so we can get rid of it. And I don't think we need jump build-up time anymore because we can already tell what time we've spent in this state so far. So we can replace that with just the current state's time. But I think we can simplify this further yet. We're already in the jump state, so we know we're jumping. So all we really have to do is check to see if the key has been released, or if the key has been pressed for too long, and then force the jump. There we go, that looks better. Now let's just clean up this jump build time. We don't really need to reset it anymore, so that's good too. And we don't really care if it's against the wall because we have a wall jump function as well, so we can get rid of this too. And I guess we kind of want to copy that down into the wall jump function, so let's just grab that. Actually, this is pretty much exactly what we want in the wall jump function as well, so let's just copy and paste that. And I'm not sure we need this, but we'll add a transition into the move function from the wall slide jump as well. And for when we're actually jumping, we just need to replace the normal jump code with the wall jump code. Something like this. This is just a matter of preference, but I think while you're charging up the wall jump, I'm going to continue the wall slide downward. if you wanted the character to stay still while he was charging his wall jump, all you have to do is leave the velocity at 0. And you may notice some errors down at the bottom here. It's just the old update jump function, and I think we can completely remove that now. Additionally, I don't think we need any of this update movement code anymore. It's been handled by the state code. And I think we're going to need one more state for when you've released from your jump, so when you're moving upward in the air. You could potentially use the fall state for this too, but then you'd have to check to see whether you're going up or down. And it'd be harder to distinguish for when you want to add an animation, so let's just add the flight state as well. Similar to adding the fall state, we have to add the enumerator value, we have to add the state update function, and the state check function. Fortunately, these functions are pretty straightforward. For example, when you're updating the state for flight, you don't really have anything powering you, so you just really have to check to see if you're entering any other states. And when you're checking to see if you're going to go into the flight state, it's going to be almost identical to the fall state check. The only real difference is that you're going up instead of down. And the only thing left to do is to make sure that if you're in a jump state, that you can potentially transition into a flight state. Okay, well, I really have no idea whether this code's going to work or not, so let's just throw in a debug line to check to see what state we're in. One of the nice things about this code is that you can check to see where the problem might be just by checking what state is active. Alright, well, movement seems okay. Not so sure about that jump though. Looks like we're in the flight state. No, this code looks fine to me. It's probably something else. The rigid body should be moving it downward, so it probably has something to do with the velocity changes in the update function. Okay, so I'm pretty sure what's happening is the rigid body gravity is just not being applied. We could apply it manually, or we could do something like this. If we store the gravity from the rigid body and then apply it after all the other velocity's been applied, it should work just fine. Okay, well, yeah, well, it falls, but it looks like we're still stuck in the flight state. I think I maybe forgot to add the additional states, the fall state and the fly state, to the switch statement. Yep, sure enough. Okay, that's pretty easy to fix. Let's try this out. Yeah, sure enough, that was the problem. Alright. Now let's give the wall jump a try. Yeah, there seems to be something wrong here. Looks like our active state is in flight, so we're not being able to transfer from flight into wall slide. Ah, there's our problem. We're trying to transfer into the wall slide jump. We should be trying to transfer into wall slide. And we're also trying to transfer into wall jump instead of wall slide and fall as well. So let's fix that too. There we have it. Alright, that makes a lot of sense. Alright, well, we're way past the time that I want to do on this video. I was hoping to sort of get into making the wall jump a little more polished, but for now I think we'll leave it at that. So I know this episode was a little more complicated and confusing than my other episodes, but it's all in preparation for doing the animation code, which I should be able to get to either next episode or the one after. Once again, I appreciate your support. Please like or share this video, and I'll try to make more. Until next time.